And good morning. I am Tamara Scott. Thanks for joining us. We are embarking on a new inaugural show, if you will. And usually you should have the website up and everything ready, and a brand and a music and a name and everything else. And I don't have that. I have to apologize. Here's the deal. I couldn't wait. There's enough happening. There are things that I need to tell you about. There's information that you need to know about. And I wasn't going to wait to have everything perfect, because I am a perfectionist. And you know what? Nothing's ever just perfect enough. So we're going to go ahead and go, because we need to get information to parents now. The new school year just started, and unfortunately, most parents are unaware of something that's been happening but is taking effect in schools right now. It's been happening a few years in the schools, but it will be cemented in the next couple of years, and there will be no variation from it. There will be no opting out of it, and it will cost school districts a good deal of money. It's called Common Core. If you're not familiar with Common Core, we'll bring some websites up that can give you information about it and let you know where you need to be looking, what you need to be learning. So joining me today, and I want to thank both of these individuals, Shane Vanderhart. Shane is a writer. He is a reporter. He works, one website is Caffeinated Thoughts.
That's correct.
But
yeah.
you're like me, you're spread over several.
Yeah, I wear many hats.
So tell us how Truth in Education is a good way people can find you.
TruthInAmericanEducation.com. Actually, if anybody's dealing with Common Core, that's probably how they know me, if they've heard my name before. I've been writing there for over 2 years about this subject. Also, FightCommonCore.com, and I work closely with American Principles Project, so you'll see some of my stuff up on their websites as well. So yeah, it's kind of spread all over the web.
Very good. And also joining us in the conversation is Michelle Crystal. Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, Michelle is one of those people who rattled the cage. She just made sure people learned about this and got informed on this. How did you come across it?
Well, I consider myself to be somewhat informed of everything recent, but I was shocked when my third grade twins came home and were told that they were reading a certain book. And it was just happened to be the autobiography of Barack Obama, which was totally fine with me. And I just questioned the teacher how they pick the books that they read. And that's when she kept saying Common Core, Common Core. And I stopped her and I said, why do you keep saying that? And I said, don't you mean Iowa curriculum? And she said, no, actually, we switched over to Common Core in 2010. And that's the first I heard of it. And she sent me a web page that I looked at, and it looked very benign. And so I started to do a lot more research and met with the principal as well. And after about 2 months of me researching it, I was shocked and horrified, and met with my superintendent and questioned him. And I was absolutely stunned that this has been going on, and this is the first I have heard of it.
Michelle, let me just thank you from one parent to another for taking the time, for digging in, for caring enough about your kids to not assume it's somebody else's responsibility, to not just trust the schools that they've got the best interests of your kids. You as a parent understand it's your responsibility before God to know what your kids are being taught. So thank you.
Thank you
for stepping in on that. You mentioned something, and I want to get to this. And first, I wanted to also talk about today. I don't want to date the show because the information will be relevant way past today. But today is 9/11. And so before we go any further, I think we need to take time to for the families that were directly impacted by 9/11. Our hearts go out to you still. We know that time may help heal wounds, but it doesn't take away the loss. And we're sorry for what you're dealing with. For all of us, whether we had close family members there or not, we are all impacted by 9/11. Someone actually said yesterday on their Facebook that it was the day they were celebrating as the day of normal, because that was the last day in 2001 that we ever went around in a normal environment, without being patted down at the airport, without having our bags looked through at a ball game. And so we understand what has happened to our nation. I also want to talk a little bit about the president's speech last night, if we can squeeze that in, and because that greatly impacts what we're dealing with here today. The role that he has versus the role he's assuming is a great part of Common Core, is it not, Shane?
Oh, well, yeah, he's seeing, he likes doing things without Congress, basically. And whether it comes to when it comes to education policy or Syria, at least he asked Congress about Syria. But he's, I think, perfectly content to go his own way if he disagrees and feels like he can do it. I'm not sure they're going to probably end up doing that, because I think they're sensing finally the political bleeding that they're doing, that's ongoing right now as a result of his position on Syria. But whether it's No Child Left Behind waivers, I hate No Child Left Behind as well. But really, where is it constitutional that the executive branch can just say to a state, "Oh, you don't have to follow federal law," you know? Also, we see this with EPA rulemaking, and he loves just when Congress isn't doing what he'd like to do. Well, I'll just go on my merry own way and do an executive order or some administrative rule that just kind of skirts the process.
Now, Ryan, I had not talked to Shane about this beforehand. Do you have that clip of the president's speech? Can we play that right now? This irritated me last night, Shane, of all the things people are talking about on the speech, and there's plenty to be discussed with. Mm-hmm. But this one has not gotten much traction. Shane, if you're Ryan, if you're ready, let's go ahead and play that clip.
That's my judgment as Commander-in-Chief. But I'm also the president of the world's oldest constitutional democracy. So even though I possess the authority to order military strikes, I believed it was right, in the absence of a direct or imminent threat to our security, to take this debate to Congress. I believe our democracy is stronger when the president acts with the support of Congress. And I believe that America acts more effectively abroad when we stand together. This is especially true after a decade that put more and more war-making power in the hands of the president and more burdens on the shoulders of our troops, while sidelining the people's representatives from the critical decisions about when we use force. Now, I know that after the terrible toll of Iraq and Afghanistan, the idea of any military action, no matter how limited, is not going to be popular. After all, I've spent 4.5 years working to end.
Hopefully we didn't lose too many listeners right now. I know a lot of people last night who just simply couldn't watch it. But Ryan, if we can go back to the beginning of that, now that we've all got our earphones on, we want to hear what he's saying. I want you to hear when he said he was going to go to Congress, but he didn't have to. No one's talking about that. Can you play that again, Ryan?
The world's oldest constitutional democracy. So even though I possess the authority to order military strikes, I believed it was right, in the absence of a direct or imminent threat to our security, to take this debate to Congress.
Okay. Thanks. And did you see his lips?
I believe our democracy
he
is
stumbled
stronger.
over it. He couldn't even say it directly himself. He had to pause, even though I possess the authority, which we know he doesn't. He may have the power, but he doesn't have the authority to go to war without Congress. No one's talking about that, Shane.
Well, here's, I mean, he's a divided man, because he said quite the opposite when he was a senator when it came to George W. Bush sending troops into Iraq, and when he was asked about that, with the War Powers Act, it gives the president a lot of latitude. And that's probably something that actually needs to be revisited.
Yes, some people think that the act itself is unconstitutional.
Yeah, and you know, I've actually been on both sides of the fence on this, because I did support President Bush's actions in Iraq. Looking back, hindsight being 20/20, and finding out the intelligence wasn't very good, and I'm thinking now I probably wouldn't support it. I think the president should never unilaterally order a strike when there isn't a national security interest, even in line with the War Powers Act. There is absolutely he lacks the authority, because there is nothing that impacts our national security.
And the difference would be Bush did have unilateral support.
And he did
several
have
countries.
unilateral support. Yeah, he had allies other than the terrorists that we're marking the anniversary today, 9/11, that ran planes into the Twin Towers. I mean, there's intelligence reports that link Al Qaeda with these rebel groups. And do we really want to go in and support Al Qaeda? I don't think so. Right. I don't think that's wise.
Even when we're just unclear who's really behind it,
exactly.
who really would be helping. One of the other comments he made was that when children are being killed by chemicals, that we must step in. And I thought, well, Mr. President, I guess you'll be busy tomorrow because children are killed by chemicals, 3,000 to 4,000 children a day here in America. So if you're that bothered by that, and I hope you are, then let's do something in America to stop it, because why is it wrong in Syria but okay here?
Exactly. And also, too, there's been 120,000 people killed in this war, and now he's suddenly getting upset because chemical weapons were used. As far as I'm concerned, conventional weapons, when there's mass slaughter, is just as bad as chemical weapons. So I guess you're going to have moral outrage, be morally outraged about the whole thing, about any woman, innocent woman or child or man being killed, regardless of how they were killed.
Well, the interesting thing is there actually have been 14 chemical attacks in Syria in the last 30 months. So what was so special 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
This one irritated him.
We saw pictures.
And like Pat Buchanan said, how many people do we have to kill to punish Assad for killing people with gas?
That's a good point, because I know technology has developed. I mean, it's advanced tremendously since World War II, when we used to carpet bomb.
Right.
And we can minimize collateral damage, and that word is really kind of cheap, really, when you killing innocent people through our bombs because of the smart bomb technology. But it's not 100% foolproof.
Right.
And the blast radius is still pretty large, and if you're bombing in an area where there's any type of population, you're more likely going to kill innocent people. So regardless of technology. And then Kerry said something the other day too about how the Syria strikes will be insignificantly small, or our response to Syria will be insignificantly small, or significantly small. I can't remember the exact quote. And one reporter, I can't remember his name, but he said, "What are we talking about? Blocking you on Twitter? What do we mean by that? And if it's really going to be that small, why are we doing it? Because it's obviously not going to have any impact." Even the rebels themselves said, "Our action will mean nothing in the long-term course of the Civil War."
Right, and you can tell what got under the president's skin because he made the comment about the pinprick. So you could tell he was responding. What senator was it that made that comment? Or
I'm not sure.
But you could tell he was irritated. That one had gotten under his skin. So, and that's the problem. We can't respond because a president's irritated.
Yeah.
We can't respond because a president's ego is at stake. We are still, like it or not, even though I think we've been diminished a great deal. He said he was going to change the way that world viewed America, and I would say he's certainly accomplished that, not in the way any of us would have liked, but he certainly has accomplished that. And so, like it or not, we are still the superpower. We're still the influential country that people watch and want to emulate. People are still coming here on dinghies. They're not leaving here to go to other countries. And so it's a great responsibility. And we can't respond simply because someone's ego or his credibility is at stake. It's a nation.
There is one group that's leaving the United States. That'd be corporations.
Oh, good point.
So,
well done, Shane. All right. So, Ryan, you tell me, do we need to go to break or can we? Okay, we'll go to break here. And when we come back, we'll come back to the Common Core. And Michelle, I want to ask you the question because you mentioned they differentiated between Iowa Core and Common Core. So let's discuss for Iowa listeners, what is the difference when we come back? I am Tamara Scott here with Shane Vanderhart, Michelle Crystal. We're talking about Common Core, the federal invasion and takeover of your education system happening right now in a school near you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I am administrative manager
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did.
For safety and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed rider, it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
And good morning. I am Tamara Scott, and you're watching, you're listening to the inaugural show, if you will, for a new talk show dealing with issues that are affecting you. When the headlines hit home, we want to be able to help you and how that's going to impact your family, whether it's legislative, whether it's educational, whether it's just cultural. Everything we do, I believe, the family is the strength of the community. And when the family is hurt and broken, the society pays a cost. When the family is healthy, society will benefit. And I think we'll see that. I think we used to see that as we all scratch our heads and wonder what happened in the last several decades. Joining me is Shane Vanderhart and Michelle Crystal, and we're talking about Common Core. And Michelle, I had just asked you, when we were talking about it, you mentioned that someone in the school district had said, oh, we're not doing Common Core, Iowa Core, we switched to Common Core. First off, is there a difference?
That's a great question, and that's very confusing. And Shane, you can jump in. I know Shane's very well versed on this as well. Talked to a lot of educators, and what originally happened in 2008, legislature did give our Iowa Department of Ed to make it mandatory that every school district follows the curriculum that our Department of Ed set forth. So once that did come in place, they did originally call it Iowa Core Iowa Curriculum, which it really wasn't a curriculum. It was just a set of standards that every school district should follow. Mm-hmm. In 2010, when Chet Culver did sign on to have Iowa be one of the 45 states who are doing it, then the Department of Ed decided to go ahead and switch over to Common Core, and that just included English and math.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So with that, it actually was a set of standards that every student was able to go through, pass, and be proficient in. But with that, the Iowa Core did align with the Common Core, but at this time currently, every school district is able to roll that out as they wish. They're not mandated on using a particular curriculum. They just have to meet the standards. Now, how that's going to differ when Common Core hits truly in fall of 2014 is they will abide by the new testing, not the Iowa Basic Skills, but the Smarter Balance testing. And that is going to be the game changer. So teachers will not be able to teach as they wish, as they will. It will actually be rolled out, and they're going to be taught how to teach and what to teach and not have the freedom any longer. And a lot of teachers are unaware of this, and the states and the districts that have rolled it out, it has been very alarming. There have been teachers that have retired. There have been principals who actually, a principal wrote a book on why she supported it too until it got rolled out in her district. She is now saying how to get out of it. So it's very different. A lot of people are going to be very surprised.
Yeah, and the Iowa Core also encompasses history, science, and 21st century learning skills. Those were added in 2008 and 2007. It's when the legislature made the Iowa Core mandatory for public schools as well as accredited non-public schools. So kind of a big thing that happened last year with the state legislature was passing independent private accreditation. So this kind of gives accredited private schools an out so they can have all the benefits of accreditation, but be accredited through a third party like Association of Christian Schools International. And once that happens, they don't have to abide by, they don't have to follow the Iowa Core if they don't want to.
Okay. Now, and some of those standards are higher than the accreditation through the state, is what I hear.
Yeah, I would say most I would say most schools have a higher standard than what the state offers.
Okay. But even if they would opt out of the Common Core, we hear that it won't matter whether you're homeschooled, private schooled, because if you want your child to go through the assessment process that we know is probably an SAT and an ACT, to enter into the college arena, those tests will be aligned with Common Core.
Yes.
So no matter where your child goes to school, they will be affected.
Everybody will be impacted. It'll just be how much of an impact it's going to make on your daily life. For a private school kid who's in a independent accredited school, or for a homeschooling kid, they're not going to necessarily feel it on a daily basis unless for some reason we suddenly have no other non-aligned Common Core resources out there, which is slowly happening because it's becoming a monopoly. And publishers they're capitalistic. They see what's going on. They look at 45 states, and then Minnesota adopted the ELA standards, not the math standards.
How did they do that? I thought you had to accept the whole thing.
Well, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, because we've been told it's all or nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm not entirely sure. I think they're kind of I know Common Core State Standards Initiative does not list Minnesota on their website as being part of that initiative. So they say 45 states. They don't recognize Minnesota. And the reason they don't is while Minnesota adopted ELA, they didn't adopt the whole thing. Therefore, they weren't abiding by the Memorandum of Understanding.
And if people want to see the list of states, the map of states, they can go to
corestandards.org.
corestandards.org.
Even though that's actually, because again, you have Minnesota that adopted half of them. Alaska, initially Governor Palin, when Race to Top came out, said, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want federal strings. So she rejected it. Unfortunately, Governor Parnell has not had the same attitude towards this. They joined Smarter Balance. Well, the first red flag went up for those of us who were watching education policy when they joined the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Well, wait a minute. If you're doing that, that means you're aligned to the Common Core. And lo and behold, you read through the Alaska standards, and they practically plagiarized the Common Core standards. They don't mention Common Core in it at all. But we've had, I've read through some of them, and I've had James Milgram, for instance, read through the math standards and said, yeah, these are aligned. These are exactly the same.
And he was the only mathematician.
On the validation committee.
On the validation committee. And he refused to sign off?
He refused to sign off. So here, so you got Alaska, who basically through the back door adopted these, plagiarized them. But Common Core State Standards Initiatives, they're not recognizing them. But that's kind of, that's neither here nor there. It doesn't matter. They've adopted the Common Core.
Is that kind of what Iowa's doing, Michelle, when they say we're Iowa Core versus Common Core, but we're accepting the same?
Well, Iowa, at least you could go to, the corestandards.org and see that Iowa's a part of it. And you can read through the website and see some mention of Common Core. The same's not true for Alaska. And in Virginia, I've been told they've rewritten some of their standards too, where they're not probably as bad as Alaska, but they've made some steps toward embracing Common Core as well.
So for those people who are not familiar with Common Core, it says state standards, but tell us, this was not state-led. It was developed by who?
It was developed by the National Governors Association, Council of Chief State School Officers, and Achieve Incorporated.
And where did Chief of Council State Schools come? We'd never heard of that.
These are trade organizations. It's kind of like a, I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess not a union.
Would it be
but,
like the CWA, like the Workers of America?
Kind of like maybe like a chamber group for governors and a chamber group for directors of state departments of education would be kind of the equivalent.
Which some people would say, well, that sounds good. Corporations will be helping make kids ready, because we hear kids aren't even career ready. They're not college ready. They're not career ready. They're not able to hold a job when they get out of high school. Mm-hmm. So it sounds good.
It sounds good, yeah. I mean, and I think a lot of the people who support Common Core, they're adopting it. A lot of times sight unseen, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce adopted, or they said, hey, these are great. They weren't even published yet. Because of the talking points, because who's against strong state standards? Who's against having rigorous standards? Do you hate children? That's kind of the looks you get when you speak out against this in a room full of people who've swallowed the Kool-Aid. And I'm thinking, I'm for good state standards, but actually I prefer them even more local, have school district standards and let them determine them. But I'm for strong content-based standards, not skill-based, and this whole mindset of let's prepare kids, let's make them college and career ready, ready for the workforce. The purpose of education is to basically develop strong citizens who can think. It's not just to give them skills to work. Now you can. So I think the approach to education is wrong, and we're starting to see a hyper emphasis, I believe, on STEM, and some of these countries that are basically kicking our butts when it comes to science and math are laughing because they don't have STEM programs.
And so for all our listeners out there, their ears just perked because we've heard STEM a lot in political
science,
speeches.
Technology, engineering, mathematics is
and
what STEM stands for.
Good thing, bad thing.
Well, on its face, it doesn't seem like a bad thing. And as far as strengthening those subject areas, I'm not opposed to, but emphasizing them over others, I think, is a mistake. And it's kind of like pushing kids toward a particular career path when that kid may not be wired that way. Tamara, you and I, we know the scriptures. We homeschooled our kids, train up a child in the way he or she should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. I think it's Proverbs 22:6. And the whole gist of that verse, when you look at the Hebrew, is talking about the bent of the child, and that's how God has created that child and how He has plans for them and what they're meant to be. And we as parents are to encourage that and help foster that and develop that. And it may or may not be a science or technology field.
Right. And again, if it brings in the whole Common Core, if it's part of the Common Core, it's not good for the child or the classroom. And how many friends do you have who are working but not in their career field or their area of major? They may have a college degree, but that's not the field they're in.
Well, me.
and so if we couldn't figure that out by college, why do we think as 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th graders we can pin where kids should be? This is just such a dangerous mentality. Mm-hmm. Not to mention we're positioning kids in the way where government or some corporation may say they need kids in the future. They predict they'll need this many workers or they'll need this many healthcare workers. That's not the school's role, and it's a dangerous role for government to be in with our children who are developing and may change as they go. This Common Core, would a Da Vinci or a Pasteur, Pasteur didn't even have medical school, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not sure of his background, but definitely a smart guy.
But the things where people have really excelled, was not where the people saw them heading in 3rd, 5th, 8th grade.
No.
Well, this has been done. It's currently being done in a really small country called China. And
That's true.
Sometimes, see, Michelle, you just got that mother's sense of right and wrong, and it's not going to fly.
And I completely disagree with this. And the one thing that really upset me the more I read into Common Core is that the child is no longer an individual. They're going to bring the entire classroom up in a certain way, and if that kid cannot keep up with it, they're going to be left behind. They're going to be pushed up to the next standard, to the next program, and it's no longer going to be for the individual. Now, I had a teacher say, she's like, all of my children are different. And she said, and this makes everybody the same. And so teaching is very different. I have 4th grade twin boys, and they learn very differently. Mm-hmm. And this takes away all of their individuality completely. And it is very scary because it not only does not even go back to the basics, but it teaches theories that are out there in the local community right now, similar to what Shane talked about, the EPA. It's going to start teaching our kids that there is man-made global warming that they don't have another choice. And the more that comes down, this actually was even talked about. This is actually violates 3 federal statutes in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Is doing Common Core. It prohibits the direction, supervision, and control of curriculum. And that's why Senator Grassley is actually trying to defund a lot of the Department of Education, because it does violate the Constitution multiple ways with mm-hmm. this Common Core.
Which is why we have a division in this state, because we have Senator Grassley, who understands it, who understands the danger of it, has written a letter. Mm-hmm. The RNC on a national level passed a resolution in April of 2013 to move away from Common Core. Indiana, Alabama, mm-hmm. because of that resolution, have taken actions, and they're working on moving away.
Alabama they had a couple state senators weasel out, so it kind of died in committee last session, but hopefully it'll pick back up next session.
And so we have the people in Iowa who say no, and mm-hmm. we have people in Iowa who are pushing it under STEM, mm-hmm. under Iowa Core. Call it what you will. It's the same skunk. It will smell just as bad once it's inside the building.
Exactly. And Michelle alluded to the next generation science standards, which is coming down the pike, and we have a task force.
When's the next meeting on that?
That is the 18th, September 18th.
Is that open to the public?
Yes, it is, and that's at the Science Center from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You obviously won't be able to talk if you come, but it would be good to just be a fly on the wall and hear what's going on. I heard the last task force meeting in August was nothing but a next generation science standards infomercial. And when basically this task force, when it was set up, was meant to be to look at the standards compared to Iowa science standards, which I will admit are not very good, mm-hmm. and come to a conclusion to make a recommendation to the State Board of Education. But it seems like they're just railing down going down the tracks of, hey, let's get this pushed through, and it's very likely the State Board of Education will actually adopt these before the state legislature is in session. So
and we call these standards, but Dr. Sandra Stolsky, who was on the validation committee
mm-hmm.
and refused to sign off on it when she saw mm-hmm. what the finished product would look like, says they're not standards. They're skill sets at the very best, but they are not standards. And when it sounds like a good idea that we want standards, but Shane, we've seen it in No Child Left Behind. What they did was lower the standard so that everyone could have a better outcome.
Yeah. Let's just lower the proficiency, rate if we're not meeting the grade. That way, we get the feds off of our back. I mean, no, there's not been a single federal initiative, and I'll be first to say that Common Core was not started by the federal government, so I don't want some advocate to say, "Oh no, Shane, it's not federally written. It was not federally led." You're right. It wasn't started by the feds, but they've certainly doubled down on it and they've gotten involved. So, and I haven't finished my cup of coffee, and I can't remember what I was going to finish saying.
Well, and I think Shane is right of how it was started, but this has been in the writing since 2003. And then when you have the President of the United States talk at his State of the Union address that he's going to roll out Race to the Top. And what he did is he told states, if you do not sign on to this, I will withhold all Title I funding. And so he was able to not only pass the money for this, mm-hmm. but it was in the 2009 stimulus package. And so it was not even brought between Congress as well.
Ernie Duncan's doubling down on adoption of the Common Core and adherence to the Common Core through basically the renewals of the No Child Left Behind waivers. They initially gave out the waivers, but they had an end date, so now they're up for renewal. So he's going to be able to tighten the screws more.
States off the hook of one bad program if they'd sign on to this program.
Yep.
Okay. Ryan, and thank you to Ryan Northfield, who is coaxing me through this show with all the background technology that we have to do. Ryan, who is our caller?
We have Ernie on.
Excellent. Oh, so Shane, you just talked about the contracts and signing out of one to sign on to another one. Ernie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've been listening to the conversation. You know Shane Vanderhart. You know Michelle Crystal. We've been in some of the same meetings together. Shane just mentioned getting rid of one bad contract and now being obligated to another one. And Ernie, you have a great phrase for it. You call it tyranny by contract.
That's exactly right, Tamara. What's happened is the federal government used to give money out with grants to get people to do things. They've now figured out they don't even have to give you the money. They just have to say, maybe we'll give you the money. And you can sign on to these programs, and somebody may get some money. Very, very interesting problem.
And so, Ernie, we're looking at it from education, from the standards, but you come at it from what, the contract aspect of it, the federalist aspect of it. What is your concern with this?
Well, what I have found, and this is just one of many of these programs, but the bureaucrats have figured out that using grants or promises of grants, they can have local governments enact law, rules, or regulations that the federal government is constitutionally prohibited from enacting, which is why I call it tyranny by contract. In this case, we have a 15-page memorandum of understanding that was signed by Governor Culver, the chief state school officer, et cetera, in 2010 that bound the state, in its words, to every statement and assurance made in the 217-page application for Race to the Top.
Wow. Government.
And that was a bureaucrat-written document. This is done without the legislature, without legislative input, and becomes law under contract law. It is a contract with the Smarter Balance Consortium that has a similar contract, they call it a cooperative agreement, with the U.S. Department of Education in return for their grant funding. And so the way these work, they are interlocking contracts that tie the state, in this case the state of Iowa, to all the terms and conditions swept up in all these other agreements. And if you read those contracts, the federal government designated exactly what had to be done in terms of who had to authorize and sign the contracts that the state signed, what data mining had to be done. They specifically say that at the federal level, and it's tied into our contract, that student-level data will be delivered to the federal government. So to say, well, we're going to only aggregate it at a certain level and so forth, doesn't really break the contract. We are contractually bound for this.
And you just hit on something we hadn't talked about yet, data mining, the information they will be taking from our children about our homes, about guns, about discipline, religious experiences and activities. Ernie, can you stay with us through the break and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned.
To obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
Yes, now your favorite programs on Webcast One Live can all be watched and listened to on any Android or Apple device. Your phone, tablet, or iPad. Yes, your favorite shows on Webcast One Live are available live or on podcast wherever you go. Let me introduce to you some of our great shows.
Shalom. Every week on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, we'll talk about issues in the Middle East, issues related to the Jewish tradition and religious traditions in general, and keep you up to date on exactly what's going on around the world. You may know some of the story, but you haven't heard all of the story until you've heard it on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman and our special guests we have on every week.
Hi, I'm Doc. You listen to me every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Doc and Lefty radio podcast program, where we discuss all the relevant topics of the day, including state, local, and national politics. My partner in crime, Lefty, often likes to have a little bit of conservative justice served upon him, so please turn in for the fireworks every week from 6 to 7 p.m. on Tuesdays at webcastonelive.com. Thank you.
So when you want to watch your favorite Webcast One program, remember, there's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
And thanks for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. My guest is Shane Vanderhart and Michelle Crystal in studio, and Ernie Rudolph is on the phone. We are, I guess, becoming experts in Common Core by default, and concerned about our children and our future in America. And if you're just joining the conversation, people can listen in on webcastonelive.com. You can join in the conversation by dialing 855-244-0077, 855-244-0077. Ernie, you had just talked about the data mining. Take us through, and for any school who says we're not going to participate in that, is that possible?
According to the contract, it is not possible because the tie-in is contractually, again, so we're talking contract law, binds the individual schools to deliver the information to the state and the state to deliver it to the Smarter Balance Consortium and the Smarter Balance Consortium to deliver it to the U.S. Department of Education. The data is already being captured in Iowa as a result of a grant several years ago. And Shane, you have the exact word for it. It's longitudinal something or other.
Yeah, SLDS, the statewide longitudinal database system.
There you go. So they're already capturing this information and feeding it within the state. However, these contractual links feed it back to the federal government. And even though some of the things that we would be concerned about in terms of data mining may not be collected today, because of these tie-ins and our agreement contractually to abide by whatever the Smarter Balanced Consortium comes up with, if those bureaucrats have a brilliant idea that they'd like to know where the guns are in the home, what the health situation is of the family, what the family situation is, they can ask for and get that information because we have bound ourselves to that.
And let me be clear, I made the comment earlier that when it comes to assessments, all kids will be impacted no matter where they're schooled, but your kids would be much better off being schooled at home or in a private school so they are not subject to some of these programs and some of the side effects that are going to come with the residue of Common Core. Some of the questions they'll be asking, when I was just recently at the David Barton at Glenn Beck Studios in Dallas and doing a strategy session on stopping Common Core nationwide, the data, you're right, Ernie, is already being collected, but questions such as, where do your parents practice their faith, or what activities do you do with religion, what guns, discipline? You're pitting children against their parents without them even knowing it, and it's going to create that wedge even further between children and parents. When I talk to parents about homeschooling, their first thing is we'd never get along, and I say, if you pull them out of that public school, you'll be surprised how much better you will get along right away, because subconsciously, just tone, however it's done, children are taught division from their family members, from children of other ages in the public school system. And you'll be much better off as a family if you'll try the homeschooling. So we can't pull out of the data mining. It will happen. Dr. Sandra Stulski, if you want to hear a phone call on this, you can go to Concerned Women for America's website, cwfa.org. And on the banner across the top, it talks about the Common Core conference call. Listen to the last half hour of that conference call. It's 90 minutes, but the last half hour, Dr. Sandra Stulski talks about the data collection, and using just 7 points of data collection, they were able to identify with 85 or 86% accuracy who the students were.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine what they'll do with 400 points of data. And we know with the FERPA, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, but they've already changed the law through the administration angle. Remember that president who just earlier said, I don't have to. I don't have to go through Congress. I can just do this. They just administratively changed the laws, and they've been sending that information out, as Ernie says, whether it's corporations, Department of Labor, what other organizations, governmental or non-governmental, that they want to have information on your kids.
What's interesting is actually in January of 2012, the department issued new regulations eviscerating the FERPA law. Mm-hmm. And if no one knows what that is it's called Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act in 1969. So to actually prevent this, and if the government did ask for information, that parent would be notified and they would have to give consent. But what this did is just, it actually took parents out of it. Mm-hmm. And we have no rights at all to object. But the current department said there's nothing to worry about. Mm. Whenever the government says that.
Iowa Department of Education says that too when it comes to data. Don't worry, we're not collecting that. No, you're not. Trust us. We won't send that. I can trust you about as far as I can throw you. I mean, who knows with the change of administration, rules will change. Attitudes could change. We could suddenly see them, collecting all sorts of data. I mean, we already have, they're doing the Iowa Youth Survey, which asks a whole bunch of inappropriate questions as far as I'm concerned. Who's to say they're not going to, they're already right now they're reporting it as aggregate data, but, who's to say what kind of data they're actually storing on that? I mean, my kids aren't in public school, so I haven't actually seen a survey and what kind of personal information they're asking as far as name and all that. I have copies. You do? Okay, I'd love to see.
Mine are old. My kids have been out of school for a while, but I've done several shows over the last decade on that youth survey. Horrible survey that they put in front of our children.
Yeah.
And Teen Screen was also in the schools and just left voluntarily in December of 2012. Ken Kramer, you can do a search on PsychNet or Psych Search with Ken Kramer, and he's been studying this for some time, and they were thrilled when they pulled out of the schools because of all the damage they've done to children, and they're diagnosing kids with bipolar and ADD without parents' knowledge, and just messing with kids' heads. But they pulled out. We couldn't figure out why. Now it makes perfect sense. They no longer need Teen Screen that was controversial. They're going to be doing it through the assessments. And some of the folks at the Barton Beck Project, if I told you what they said was already happening with the bracelets that measure the pulse, and one of our legislators said that's already happening in a school district here in Iowa.
Well, yeah, that's actually Grundy Center has biometric technology. They're using it in PE class. They're not using it in any other class.
Well,
right
we usually
now.
eke it in. Yeah, we usually eke it in a way that's not alarming.
That, as far as I know, they're the only school district in Iowa using that technology right now. But they are using it for semi-benign purpose. But who's to say that won't change?
Right. That's how we bring it in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you do get on and start looking at that, in May, it was end of the school year, that Florida did start iris scanning their students coming in.
Yeah.
And the parents found out, and actually the police removed the parents from the school grounds when they were protesting.
If you think this can't happen, think back to David Parker on the kindergarten, just wanted to be told ahead of time what his student was going to be taught. He was arrested, remember that, in Massachusetts? And what most people don't know either, I was doing radio at the time, and a year later his child was beat up on the playground. That anniversary of so-called same-sex marriage becoming legal in that state. And there was little done. His son was not sent to the nurse's office. There was nothing done to help his son in that situation. Wow. Ernie, so if a school says we're not going to do the data, Ernie, they don't have a choice with that contract and with the money, which Shane, Michelle, the legislators have all admitted, the ones we've talked to, the one thing they hear from the superintendents is we need the money. We want the money from the federal government. Can they get the money without the data collection?
No, and that is the hook. It is the money, and frankly, we are all based on federal plans. The state is totally dependent on the federal government. Half of the money that we spend comes through the federal government. They take their vig and send some of it back to us. It's all our money, but the fact is that it comes through the feds, and that is the link. That's how we got 55-mile-an-hour speed limits. That's how we got 0.08 alcohol, blood alcohol, how we got seatbelts, and how we will get Common Core if this continues.
Which studies will show, I just want to add, studies will show that the alcohol-related deaths went up after they forced us to lower the blood alcohol limit.
The thing that is disturbing about this to me, and the reason that I focus on the contract nature, is that we as Americans believe we have a representative government and that we elect people who will make the right choices for the country and for our state. And what we find is that the bureaucratic approach to tyranny by contract is to instill rules, laws, and regulations through contract law without legislative involvement. So you don't even have a representative that has a say in this. It's all done through bureaucrats. In this case, the only elected official that signed the contract was the then Governor Culver. And so we are dependent at that point on one man to have, first of all, gotten the right advice from the bureaucrats who want this to happen. And secondly, have the moral standing to be able to say this is a bad idea for Iowans and for Iowans' children. And if you can put your faith in one man like that, you're better than I.
Who answers to special interest groups, lobbyists, and in this case, bureaucrats?
Ernie had mentioned that the money's going to be tied to data, and just something interesting is happening in California. The California Assembly is actually looking at a bill called AB 484, which is a bad bill. It's trying to push ahead Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. So I'm against it. They're wanting to revamp move from the California assessments, whatever they're using, to Smarter Balanced. I think it's foolish. But one thing they're wanting to do is throw out the test scores for the first year and not do testing in the transition. Well, Arnie Duncan said, letting an entire school year pass for millions of students without sharing information on their school's performance with them and their families is the wrong way to go about this transition. He said in a statement, this is LA Times reporting, no one wants to overtest, but if you're going to support all students' achievement, you need to know how all students are doing. So Duncan declined to specify what action he could take. And in fact, the federal government has no direct authority over state school systems. Glad to see that they acknowledge that. But
it doesn't mean much.
I know, but the department controls billions of dollars in federal funds, which can make up about 10% of a school district's budget. This money adds up to about $600 million a year for Los Angeles Unified, according to the district. If California moves forward with a plan that fails to assess all its students as required by federal law, the department will be forced to take action, which could include withholding funds. No data, no funds.
No data, no funds. We're winding down on time. I hope that you will come back, Michelle and Shane and Ernie, if we can have you join us again. There's so much on this, and maybe we'll start breaking it down by topic and doing roundtable discussions so that we can get to parents who want to know. They can listen on the go. We'll make it as accessible as possible. But you mentioned California, Shane, and I just want to mention this book, Common Core, A Trojan Horse for Education Reform, written by Orlean Cole, Koehle, Koehle. She has almost everything in here, from cost to the program to the threat of teachers having any old curriculum in their classroom, past lessons, past teaching styles, text, books kids can use as a reference. Teachers have been told to get it out of the classroom or they will be disciplined and possibly face firing. This is what we're headed for with Common Core.
Obviously not tenured teachers. That's a whole different program.
I'm not sure on that. I think this may add a whole new wing to that. So thank you for joining us. We've been kind of raw and exposed today, if you will. I would have loved to have the nail polish on the show, all the trimming done. But you need to have this information. Start talking to your friends about it. Start asking your friends about it. If you want more information in Iowa, we have a Facebook page. It's not any harder than that. Go to Stop Common Core Iowa. Stop Common Core Iowa. There's 2 pages on that, actually. One's a closed group, but one's a public group. You can just get information and links off of. Shane has Truth in American Education.
AmericanEducation.com, and there's a Facebook group for that as well. If you want to kind of hear, find out what's going on nationwide, we try to update everybody with information from a variety of different states.
And we'll continue to give you more links on those Facebook pages, stories that come up. We can give you safe websites where you can go get information from. Michelle Crystal, thank you for joining us. Michelle will remain active in this fight because we're not letting her out of it, but she won't. She just will not back away. And so Shane, thank you for the work. You've been writing on this for years, and it took that many years to get the rest of us to go, oh my goodness, this is bad.
Yeah, it's amazing. It just kind of, 6 months ago is really kind of the tipping point.
I think so.
Michelle Malkin and Glenn Beck getting involed really kind of swayed.
Yep.
Momentum.
And Concerned Women for America is on board now, and
Americans
we're
for Prosperity, Freedom Works.
Yep. Giving good resources and manpower to it. So if you want more information, contact me by my Facebook page, I guess. Tamara Scott, you're welcome to pop on there and ask me a question, or Stop Common Core in Iowa. My thanks to Ryan Northfield. If you've got ideas for the name of the show, or if you've got ideas for the show, period, send them to us. The Facebook is fine. And thank you for listening in. Join us again. We're going to come back next Wednesday and talk about this some more. Be encouraged. Never be complacent.